Hi, welcome to my channel. Now we uncover the untold story of the fall of the Soviet Union, the end of a superpower. In December 1991, the world watched in disbelief as a great empire, one that had dominated global politics for nearly a century, suddenly collapsed. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, better known as the Soviet Union or USSR, disintegrated into 15 independent countries. It was the dramatic conclusion of a long, turbulent struggle, a story of revolution, ideology, ambition, and failure. The fall of the Soviet Union not only ended the Cold War, but also reshaped the modern world. The birth of a communist empire. To understand the fall, we must begin with the beginning. In 1917, during the chaos of World War I, the Russian Revolution erupted. The people, exhausted by war, poverty, and the monarchy's failures, rose against Tsar Nicholas II. In October 1917, the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, seized power in the name of the workers and peasants. Their dream was to create a communist utopia, a society without classes, private property, or oppression. In 1922, the Soviet Union was officially established, bringing together Russia and several neighboring republics under one flag. It was the world's first socialist state, ruled by the Communist Party. Lenin's vision and Stalin's iron fist. Lenin's government promised equality, but after his death in 1924, his successor, Joseph Stalin, transformed the Soviet Union into a dictatorship. Stalin's rule was brutal. Millions were sent to labor camps, gulags, or executed in purges. Yet under Stalin, the USSR also became a global power. Massive industrialization, agricultural collectivization, and a focus on heavy industry turned the nation from a peasant society into a superpower within a generation. By the end of World War II, the Soviet Union had not only defeated Nazi Germany, but also occupied much of Eastern Europe. Stalin built a wall of communist satellite states, creating a vast sphere of influence, stretching from Berlin to Siberia. The Cold War begins. After 1945, the world split into two rival camps. One, the United States and its allies, representing capitalism and democracy. Two, the Soviet Union and its allies, representing communism and authoritarian rule. This rivalry led to the Cold War, a political, ideological, and military struggle that lasted for more than 4 decades. The two superpowers never fought each other directly, but they competed everywhere, in arms races, space explorations, and proxy wars in Korea, Vietnam, and Afghanistan. Both sides built thousands of nuclear weapons capable of destroying the planet many times over. The world lived under constant fear of annihilation. Life inside the Soviet Union. While the Soviet Union projected strength abroad, life inside the country was far from perfect. Ordinary citizens lived under strict censorship and surveillance. The KGB, the state security agency, controlled speech, media, and even thoughts. Dissenters were imprisoned or exiled. The economy was centrally planned. The government decided what to produce, how much to produce, and at what price. At first, this created rapid growth, but over time, it led to shortages, inefficiency, and corruption. Stores often ran out of basic goods like bread, soap, or clothing. People waited in long queues for food, while propaganda posters promised a bright communist future. Despite this, many Soviets took pride in their achievements: free education, universal healthcare, and the sense that they were part of a great global power challenging the capitalist West. The space race and pride. In the 1950s and 1960s, the Soviet Union achieved remarkable technological feats. They launched Sputnik in 1957, the world's first artificial satellite, shocking the United States. Then, in 1961, Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space, a monumental victory for Soviet science. For a brief time, the USSR seemed unstoppable. Its ideology inspired revolutions around the world, from Cuba to China to Vietnam. But beneath the pride, cracks were forming. Cracks in the system. By the 1970s, the Soviet Union was beginning to stagnate. Its rigid economy could no longer keep up with Western innovation. While the U.S. was producing personal computers and advancing technology, the USSR was struggling with outdated factories and declining productivity. Corruption spread through every level of the Communist Party. Leaders grew old, conservative, and afraid of change. At the same time, the cost of maintaining military dominance and supporting communist allies around the world drained resources. The long war in Afghanistan, from 1979 to 1989, became the Soviet Union's Vietnam, killing thousands of soldiers and weakening morale. The rise of Mikhail Gorbachev. When Mikhail Gorbachev became leader in 1985, he was only 54, young, energetic, and determined to save the system. He introduced two major policies. 1. Glasnost, openness, allowed freedom of speech and access to information. 2. Perestroika, restructuring, aimed to reform the economy by introducing limited market principles. For the first time in decades, Soviet citizens could criticize the government openly, read foreign news, and discuss politics. But instead of saving the USSR, Glasnost exposed its deep problems: corruption, economic failure, and human rights abuses. The people became disillusioned. The empire unravels. As reforms spread, the satellite states in Eastern Europe began demanding independence. In 1989, one by one, communist governments collapsed. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, all broke free from Soviet control. The Berlin Wall, the symbol of communist division, was torn down that same year. Millions celebrated across Europe. Inside the Soviet Union, nationalist movements rose in the republics: Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Ukraine, and others, all demanded sovereignty. Gorbachev tried to hold the Union together, but the forces of change were unstoppable. The 1991 coup and collapse. In August 1991, hardline communist officials launched a coup against Gorbachev, hoping to restore the old system. Tanks rolled into Moscow, and Gorbachev was placed under house arrest. But the coup failed, thanks to massive public resistance led by Boris Yeltsin, the president of the Russian Republic. Crowds surrounded the parliament building, demanding freedom and democracy. The failure of the coup destroyed the Communist Party's credibility. Within months, one republic after another declared independence. On December 25, 1991, Gorbachev resigned as president of the Soviet Union. The red flag bearing the hammer and sickle was lowered from the Kremlin for the last time. The next day, the USSR ceased to exist. Aftermath: a new world order. The fall of the Soviet Union changed everything. 15 new countries emerged, including Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Georgia, Kazakhstan, and others. A Cold War officially ended, leaving the United States as the world's only superpower. In the West, the collapse was celebrated as the triumph of democracy and capitalism. But in the former Soviet republics, life was hard. The economy collapsed. Millions lost their jobs and savings. Corruption and organized crime exploded. The 1990s were a decade of chaos for many post-Soviet states. For Russians, the loss of empire was a wound that never fully healed. Many still felt pride in the old Soviet days, when their nation stood equal to the United States. The legacy of the Soviet Union. Even today, more than 30 years later, the fall of the USSR continues to shape global politics. 1. NATO expanded eastward, bringing former Soviet states into the Western Alliance. 2. Russia, under leaders like Vladimir Putin, sought to reclaim influence and prestige. 3. Conflicts in Ukraine, Georgia, and other regions trace their roots back to the breakup of the Soviet Empire. The world that emerged from 1991 was freer in some ways, but more unstable in others. The balance of power that had defined the 20th century was gone, and a new, uncertain era had begun. Lessons from the fall. The fall of the Soviet Union teaches powerful lessons. 1. No empire, no matter how mighty, lasts forever. 2. A system built on fear and control cannot survive without reform. 3. And perhaps most importantly, freedom, once tasted, cannot be taken away again. Finally, the collapse was not just the end of a country, but the end of an idea, the dream of a global communist revolution. Yet, it also symbolized rebirth, new nations, new freedoms, and a chance for millions to shape their own destiny. Finally, thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share this World History Facts Hub channel.